Hi, this is Rick from For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. I took a group of my friends from a church in the city to Algonquin Park. I had been wilderness camping before with a group of people and I loved it. And I said, hey, my Toronto friends, come with me. We'll go wilderness camping together. And it was a bit of a nightmare trip. First, I took them in the wrong direction and I added 2 hours to our canoe trip, and they hated me for that. Second, I took a bunch of city people who had never been in a canoe before, and we just jumped straight into wilderness camping. And it took us about an hour just to get away from the beach as some of my friends stopped uh, canoeing in circles. A 4 hour canoe trip turned into about an 8 or 9 hour canoe trip to the site. We finally got to the site and it had begun to already get dark, so we had to put the tents up, and man, was everybody totally grumpy with me. I had nowhere to go. I had to stay with them. I still had to take them back out the very next morning. That group I was with got really, really grumpy with me. Let me ask you a question. Can you think of a time when you made a mistake or you managed to get a large group of people really ticked off at you and you still had to work with them and you couldn't run away and hide? If you're watching with someone, would you please pause the video and share that story with the person you're watching with, and also let them know what you did to endure that context, staying with a group of people who are really grumpy at you. This video is based on 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 to 16. The people this is written to are surrounded by people that are very, very grumpy at them. Very few people like them. They're socially excluded. They've already been driven away from their original towns. They can't hide, and they need to live in a community where the entire community simply doesn't like them very much. Actually, they're also getting abused too. This text helps us understand what to do when we find ourselves in hostile contexts, either at home or at work or in your community, in your school, wherever that happens to be. If you happen to find yourself in a context that is hostile towards you at some level, this text is something to tell you about how to live and navigate in that situation. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13 to 16. So prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. So you must live as God's obedient children. Don't slip back into your old ways of living to satisfy your own desires. You didn't know any better then, but now you must be holy in everything you do, just as God who chose you is holy. For the scriptures say, you must be holy because I am holy.
Hello, would you like anything else with your croissant?
Yes, coffee, please.
Coming right up. Oh, careful, the coffee's hot.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Have you watched the For Community video yet?
No.
Well, make sure you look in the background for all the cool characters. And kids, don't forget to watch this week's episode of Connect HQ.
Okay.
Here's the point that I'd like to make with this text: how to avoid attracting negative attention in a hostile context. So if you're in a work scenario and you have been identified as somebody who's not a great employee or not well liked, if you've been scapegoated, if you're in a family that is not treating you all that great and you can't get out of that, if you're in a neighborhood that your neighbors just don't like you, they don't get along you, for whatever reason it is, if you find yourself in a place of general kind of hostility, general kind of dislike, there are a couple of things that we can do in order to lessen the negativity that's directed toward us. And we find that in this text. So I want to share with you just two thoughts around how to avoid attracting negative attention when you find yourself in that hostile place. First, very simply, behave wisely. So when I was on that camping trip with a group of my friends, and I'm still friends with a bunch of them, and I brought them to Algonquin Park completely unprepared. I was a terrible I was a terrible leader on that camping trip, and quite honestly, I'm surprised that some of us are still friends. So when I was in that camping trip with my friends from the city, and they're all grumpy with me, I did the only thing that I could do. I generally kept my mouth shut. I gave them their space, and I did my best to model to them what being a good camper looked like. So I cleared my site, I got my tent up, I got everything unpacked, and then after I had done that, I went to where their tents all were, and I helped them set up their tents and set up their sites as well. I modeled it, and I was wise with my words. Wise behavior became my key to de-escalate the group without drawing more negative attention toward me. That's what this text is all about. The original readers were in a place where no one wanted them. Everyone was grumpy with them and they were being abused. Yet they had nowhere else to go. So they were stuck living in their hostile communities. In a context of social exclusion and no gospel presence in the communities that this church lived in, lifestyle really mattered. Lifestyle gains influence with people for better neighborhoods and better life experiences. Lifestyle avoids additional negative attention. And that's what this text is going for. Let me explain this just a little bit more. Sometimes when people think about the Bible, they think that it's pretty much just a bunch of rules around lifestyle that need to be followed in order to make it into heaven, I suppose people might say. And this text sure does look like a bunch of rules that need to be followed. I mean, it looks pretty clear here that these are rules, but it's not actually. These are not general rules for living to make it into heaven. You need to remember the context here. This isn't a simple list of to-dos so that we all know how to live as Jesus' follower. This is a list for people who are living in social exclusion, without influence, without power, so that they can live in a way that won't draw negative attention to themselves. That's what this list is. And that's all that this list is. This is a text advocating behavior that will help people who are already being targeted to stay out of the spotlight and stay out of harm's way, so they're not getting any more negative attention. So, North American Jesus follower, this isn't a text to teach you how to live well in a society where you're already being treated well. This is a text for the Jesus follower who is living with a spouse who's ridiculing their choice to follow Jesus, or they're in a workplace that thinks their faith is a crutch, or they pathologize it, or you're in a system that's somehow scapegoating you. This is for the underdog. This is for the people that are going to be attacked somehow. Now, of course, there's still some sense in living like this where there's no negative attention. However, it totally doesn't make sense that this is all there is to say. Lifestyle matters, but lifestyle isn't the only thing that matters, particularly when we're in a place of safety. It's actually pretty weak. This isn't the activity of a person with power in a good place like we're in North America. This is the activity of a person without power. If you have power, you're not placing your hope in the future when Jesus will come back to fix everything. You don't need that kind of encouragement. You don't need that kind of escape. Now, of course, we still do place our hope in the second coming when Jesus comes back, but that's not our only source of encouragement right now. If you have power, you're dreaming about how you can impact your neighborhood, and you're vision casting, and you're attempting to gain a following as a very vocal and outspoken individual. This passage is awesome, but it doesn't say enough for those who actually have freedom and agency. Behavior texts like this typically have in mind the person who has no power. It's an attempt to please God first, and to do that in a way that doesn't attract more painful attention. Now, this is an important point that hopefully we can hang on to as we continue to explore this letter of 1 Peter, when we get particularly to the household texts a little bit later. Behavior texts tend to limit the powerful and protect those without power. It's never a limitation of our expression as Jesus followers, as though there was only one way to live as a Jesus follower and no other way, and everyone has to fit into the same mold. No, that's not what's going on here. Behavior-based texts are typically about how to live as a Jesus follower in a culture that's offensive toward Jesus followers. So what about you? When you find yourself surrounded by people who are grumpy with you and maybe they're abusing you a little bit, maybe they're bullying you a little bit, and you can't escape, what do? You live wisely. You don't start acting in ways that draw more negative attention to you. You live wisely and you model Jesus to everyone. In this text, it looks like someone prepared to act rather than not having a plan and looking lazy. It looks like someone who's self-controlled and not someone with anger issues or someone that's pushing issues on other people to advocate change, not when there's a negative spotlight on you. It looks like discretion. And of course, it also looks like someone prioritizing their connection with God by restricting themselves from things that will hurt that connection and doing things that will increase that connection. There's a second point that needs to be made here too. It's commit to wise living. The text says don't slip back into your old ways of living to satisfy your own desires. Just one more thing to say here. The text draws attention to something that would be very unwise. If you're already under the microscope, if there are people surrounding you that already don't like you, if you're trying to live in a way that de-escalates and avoids attracting negative attention, then you don't want to do things that are self-gratifying. The text tells us to resist acting badly because it's not going to get us out of that negative attention. Living to satisfy your own desires, to be grumpy with other people and to be angry and to live however you want that's not pleasing to God, that's going to break your connection with God and destroy what it is you are attempting to do as a Jesus follower in the first place. That is not going to help. If you're already getting attention you don't want, then you certainly don't want to start living unwisely or badly, because you'll get that negative attention much more quickly and it's going to go and make things much worse for you. Giving up is not the answer. Here's a summary. When you're in a context that's giving you some negative attention and you can't get out of it, what are you to do? Number one, you live wisely. Be self-controlled, be self-regulating, and use some discretion. Number two, commit to wise living. Any bad behavior is just going to escalate your situation. So don't give up. Stay the course of Jesus follower, modeling what it is to love God and love others. That's it from me to you. For now, would you please like? Would you please share? Would you please subscribe? Thank you for all of you who have done that. Also, would you please ask for the link? We continue to meet on Zoom twice on Sundays, one at 10:30 a.m. and the second time at 6 o'clock p.m. Would love to have you join our conversation. If you'd like to contribute, you can find the link to contribute down in the show notes. For community, creating community spaces so that you can connect with others and also with God. See you next time.